My sister stood in the middle of my parents' living room and told everyone I had destroyed her marriage. She said it clearly. No hesitation. My mother had her hand over her mouth. My father was already walking to the front door, already opening it, already pointing at it like I was something that needed to be removed before it caused further damage. There were 6 people in that room. 6 people who had known me my entire life. Not one of them asked me a single question. My sister was still talking when my father set my bag outside on the front step. Part 1. I should tell you what kind of person my sister is before I tell you what she did. Vanessa is 4 years older than me. She has always been the kind of woman who enters a room and immediately understands its social architecture. Who has power? Who wants it? Who can be useful and who cannot? She reads people the way some people read menus quickly, efficiently, already knowing what she wants before she finishes the page. Growing up, I admired that about her. I thought it was a kind of intelligence. It took me a long time to understand that it was something else entirely. I'm Claire. I was 30 years old when this happened. I worked in copywriting for a small marketing agency, rented a decent apartment across town, and had been saving towards something more permanent. A place I could actually own, a life with more solid ground beneath it. I was not dependent on my family. I want to make that clear because it matters later. I had my own income, my own lease, my own accounts. I was at my parents' house that evening because it was Sunday and Sunday dinners had been a fixture of my life since childhood. I had no idea what was waiting for me when I walked through the door. Vanessa was already there when I arrived. She and Adam had been married for 6 years. Adam was quiet, decent, the kind of man who fixed things around my parents' house without being asked and always remembered everyone's coffee order. He was not there that evening. I noticed his absence but didn't comment on it. I sat down, accepted a glass of water from my mother, and asked how everyone's week had been. Vanessa waited until we were all seated. Then she said it. She said she knew what I had done. She said she had proof. She said I had been spending time with Adam behind her back, that I had been undermining her marriage for months, that I had inserted myself into her relationship in a way that was deliberate and calculated and unforgivable. She said all of this in a single, controlled breath, like she had rehearsed it, like she had decided exactly where to place every word for maximum effect. The room went very still. I said her name. I said it once, the way you say someone's name when you need them to slow down, when you need a moment to understand what you're hearing. She didn't slow down. She looked at my parents and she said she could not be in the same family as someone who had done this to her. She said she needed them to make a choice. My mother looked at me. Her expression was not angry. It was something worse than angry. It was already decided. Like she had weighed something in her mind the moment Vanessa started speaking and had reached her conclusion before I had the chance to say a single word in response. My father stood up. He walked to the front door. He opened it. He picked up my bag from beside the coat rack, and I still don't know when he moved it there. I don't know when that happened, and he set it outside on the front step. He looked at me and said he thought I should go. That was all. No raised voice, no accusation directed at me personally. Just the door, open, and my bag on the other side of it, and my father's face arranged into something flat and resolved that I had never seen on him before and hoped to never see again. I looked at my mother. She had her hands folded in her lap and was looking at the table. I looked at the other 4 people in the room. 2 aunts, a family friend, my mother's neighbor who had been coming to Sunday dinners for 11 years. Not one of them said anything. Not one of them said, wait, let's hear her side. Not one of them said, Vanessa, give her a chance to respond. They sat in the particular silence of people who have made a collective decision to let something happen, because intervening would be inconvenient. My sister had her arms crossed and her chin lifted, and she was looking at the wall just to the left of my face. I picked up my jacket from the back of the chair. I walked to the door. I stepped over the threshold and picked up my bag from the front step, and I stood there for just a moment in the evening air, in the quiet of a Sunday in October, and then I walked to my car. Nobody followed me out. I drove to my apartment and I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes before going inside. Not crying, not calling anyone, just sitting with the engine off and the windows fogging slightly at the edges and the particular feeling of someone who has just experienced something they don't yet have the right words for. It wasn't shock exactly. That's what surprised me most. Some part of me, buried deep beneath the part that was still replaying my father's face and the sound of that door, some quiet, tired part of me was not surprised at all. That part had been waiting for something like this for a long time. Inside, I made toast because it was the only thing that felt manageable. I sat at my kitchen table and I ate it, and I thought about the first time I could remember being the one who got left behind when it counted. I was 11. Vanessa was 15. Our school had a regional arts competition and I had submitted a short story, the first piece of real writing I had ever been proud of. I made the final selection. The ceremony was on a Saturday afternoon. My parents had already committed to attending Vanessa's volleyball tournament that same day, a commitment made before my competition date was announced. I understood that. What I didn't understand was that when I suggested my mother come to my ceremony for the first half and leave early for the tournament, she looked genuinely puzzled. Like the logistics of splitting her attention hadn't occurred to her as a possibility. She went to the tournament. My father took me to the ceremony, sat in the back row and left before the awards were announced because Vanessa's team had made it to the second round. I walked home with my certificate alone. My parents never asked who won. I told myself it was a scheduling conflict. I was 11. I was very good at telling myself things. At 16, I wanted to study abroad for a summer, a language program in France partially subsidized. The kind of opportunity that required some financial contribution from the family but not an unreasonable one. My parents said they'd think about it. They thought about it for 3 weeks and then told me the timing wasn't right. That same summer, they paid for Vanessa to attend a private tennis camp for 6 weeks because her coach had said it would significantly improve her ranking. I didn't argue. I found a summer job at a bookstore instead and told myself that building independence early was probably better for me anyway. I was 16 and already writing my own consolation notes. The pattern had a rhythm to it that I had simply learned to move around, the way you learn to step over a crack in a familiar footpath without consciously registering it anymore. Vanessa's needs were immediate and visible. Mine were patient and therefore easy to defer. I was the daughter who would wait, who would understand, who could be reasoned with and redirected and trusted to absorb the shortfall without making it anyone's problem. And I had, for 30 years I had. What I sat with that Sunday night, eating toast in my kitchen, was the recognition that my family had not made a mistake when they sent me out that door. They had made a choice. There is a difference. Mistakes happen in the absence of information. That evening, they had information. They had me, standing in front of them, saying her name, ready to speak. They chose not to receive it. They chose Vanessa's version of events not because it was the only one available, but because it was the more convenient one. Because questioning Vanessa would have required effort and uncertainty and the willingness to sit inside a complicated situation. And I had always been the daughter who didn't require that kind of effort. I was the one who could handle things. I was the one who would be fine. That night I called my friend Priya, who had known me since university and who had met Vanessa exactly twice, and both times had come away with the quiet, careful expression of someone who has just identified something but doesn't want to say it aloud. I told Priya what had happened. She didn't say, "I told you so." She asked if I needed her to come over. I said no, but thank you. She said she'd call in the morning. She called at 7:45. That mattered. I also did something else that night, after I hung up with Priya and washed my plate and turned off the kitchen light. I opened my laptop and I started writing everything down. Not because I had a plan. I didn't have a plan yet. I wrote it down because I was a copywriter and words were how I organized the world, and the world had just become very disorganized, and I needed to find the edges of it again. I wrote until nearly 2 in the morning. The document was 4 pages long by the time I stopped. Adam called me on a Thursday. 10 days after the Sunday dinner. 10 days of silence from my parents, one text from Vanessa that said, "Only I hope you're reflecting," and nothing else from anyone in that room who had watched my father open the door and decided it wasn't their business. 10 days of going to work and coming home and sitting with my 4-page document and adding to it slowly, carefully, the way you add to something when you're not sure what it's going to become yet. Adam's number came up on my phone and I almost didn't answer. I'm glad I did. He sounded like a man who hadn't slept in a week. His voice had that particular thinness of someone who has been holding something heavy for too long and has finally decided to set it down regardless of where it lands. He said he was sorry for what had happened at my parents' house. He said he had only found out about it afterward. He said, and he paused for a long time before this part, he said he didn't believe what Vanessa had told the family. He said something was wrong. He said things at home had been wrong for longer than he had wanted to admit, and that he had been doing his own accounting of the last several months, and that the numbers were not adding up. I asked him what he meant by that. He said Vanessa had been distant since the previous spring. Working late, he said, but not in ways that matched her calendar. Weekend trips described as work conferences that he had later found no record of. A second email account he had discovered by accident on a shared device, already deleted by the time he looked for it again, but not before he had seen a name. He said the name twice. Daniel Cross. He said he didn't know who that was. He was asking me if I did. I didn't, not then. But I knew how to find out. I want to be honest about what happened next, because it would be easy to make it sound more strategic than it was. I wasn't running an investigation. I was a woman who had been expelled from her family based on a lie and who had a 4-page document and a copywriter's instinct for finding the thread that unravels the whole piece. I started with what I had: a name, a time frame, a sister whose alibi for her own marriage's collapse was me. Daniel Cross was not difficult to find. He had a professional profile, a LinkedIn, a history in regional sales that had intersected with Vanessa's industry at a conference the previous April. That conference was one of the weekends Adam had mentioned. I noted the date. I added it to my document. I kept going. Priya helped. She was methodical in a way. I was too close to the situation to be. She made lists. She cross-referenced dates. She asked the kind of lateral questions that approach a problem from an angle it isn't expecting. We spent 2 evenings at my kitchen table with laptops and tea and the focused quiet of people doing something that matters. Then the email arrived. It came to my inbox on a Tuesday morning from a mid-range hotel 2 cities over. An automated booking confirmation sent to the wrong address. My name is Claire Holloway. And whoever had made the reservation had entered an email with a similar structure and one transposed letter. It happened. These things happened. The booking was in Vanessa's name. The dates were the second weekend in June, the same weekend she had told my parents she was at a professional development retreat, the same weekend she had told Adam she was staying with a colleague. The room was listed as a double. The secondary guest field, which most people didn't realize populated on confirmation emails, contained a name. Daniel Cross. I sat at my desk and read the email 3 times. Then I forwarded it to myself. I printed it. I photographed the printout. I saved every version in 3 separate places. I was very calm while I did all of this. That calmness surprised me, and then it didn't. I had spent 10 days being quietly, methodically prepared for something, and now the something had arrived, and my hands knew what to do even before my mind had fully caught up. I didn't call Vanessa. I didn't call my parents. I didn't post anything or tell anyone outside of Priya and Adam. I sat with it for 2 full days. Not out of hesitation, out of certainty. I wanted to be the kind of person who acted when she was ready, not when she was reactive. I wanted what I did next to be clean and documented and entirely without drama. I had learned something from my family, not what they intended to teach me, but something. On Thursday morning, I sent 3 emails. 1 to Adam, 1 to my mother, 1 to my father. Each email contained the same attachment. The hotel confirmation, the dates, the room type, the secondary guest field with Daniel Cross's name printed clearly in plain black text. I did not write lengthy explanations. I did not editorialize or accuse or list every wound from the previous 30 years. I wrote 4 sentences in each email. Here's what I found. I thought you should have this information. I'm well, I won't be needing a response. Then I closed my laptop and went to work. I want to tell you what I expected, because what I expected and what happened were different in ways I still think about. I expected noise. I expected my mother to call immediately, my father to compose something measured and defensive, Vanessa to appear in some form, a message, a mutual contact, some managed version of a response designed to control the next part of the narrative. I expected the family machinery to begin working the way it always had, loudly in some directions, silently in others. What I got was quiet. My mother called that afternoon. She didn't say much. She said she had looked at the attachment several times. She said she didn't know what to say. I told her she didn't need to say anything right now. She asked if I was all right. I told her I was. That was the whole conversation. 3 minutes. The shortest conversation I had ever had with my mother that had contained that much. My father sent an email 2 days later. It was formal in the way his communications always were structured, minimal, careful with its words. He said he was sorry for how the evening had been handled. He said they had acted too quickly. He said he hoped I understood the position they had been in. I read that last line twice. The position they had been in, as though they had been the ones standing in the open doorway with a bag at their feet. I filled the email without responding. Vanessa did not contact me directly. What she did instead was exactly what I had expected from her from the beginning. She managed. She made calls. She worked the family network quietly, reshaping the story into something more survivable. Yes, there had been a situation. Yes, she had perhaps acted in a moment of panic. Yes, the accusation had been misdirected. She did not use the word lie. She never used that word. She was too precise for that. But the hotel confirmation existed. It had dates and names and the particular credibility of a document that had arrived by accident, without motive, generated by a machine that had no stake in anyone's reputation. You cannot narratively manage an automated email. She knew that. Adam knew that. And slowly, quietly, so did everyone else. Adam filed for divorce 6 weeks after I sent those emails. He told me in a brief message. He said he was sorry our families had become entangled in this way. He said he hoped I would be okay. I wrote back and told him I already was. I meant it. My parents asked twice in the months that followed whether I would come back to Sunday dinners. I told them I needed time. That was true, but it was also only partly the truth. The fuller truth was that I had returned in my mind to that room many times. To those 6 people sitting in their practiced silence. To my mother's already decided expression. To my father walking to the door before I had spoken a single word. And each time I returned to that room I understood more clearly that what had happened there was not an aberration. It was a demonstration of how that family operated when the cost of fairness was higher than the cost of just letting something go. I was the something they had let go, for 30 years in smaller ways, and then on a Sunday in October all at once. I stopped going to Sunday dinners. Not with an announcement. Not with a confrontation or a final conversation or any of the closure that people tell you that you need. I simply stopped arranging my life around a table that had shown me, clearly and finally, what my place at it was worth. The copywriting work continued. I picked up new clients. I moved into a better apartment in the spring, more light, a small balcony, a kitchen with enough counter space to actually cook in. I bought a plant and kept it alive, which felt like a reasonable metaphor for where I was. Priya came over for dinner the first weekend after I moved in. We cooked together and opened a decent bottle of wine and talked about everything except my family, because there was so much else to talk about now. At some point late in the evening, she looked around the apartment and said it suited me. I looked around too. She was right. It did. I had spent 30 years being the daughter who waited, who understood, who could be redirected and deferred and trusted to absorb whatever the family needed her to absorb and keep going without complaint. I had been cast in that role so early and so thoroughly that I had almost forgotten it was a role at all. Almost started to believe it was simply who I was. It wasn't who I was. It was who I had been convenient for. There is a difference. I know that now with the particular certainty of someone who has stopped performing a version of themselves and discovered quietly that the real version was steadier than expected, less defined by what she was owed or what she had lost, more defined by what she had built when the building was entirely up to her. My grandmother's certificate from that arts competition is in a box somewhere in my new apartment. I haven't unpacked everything yet, but I know it's there, and one day I'll find a frame for it and I'll put it on a wall in a home that belongs entirely to me. I think she would have liked that. I think she would have liked all of it.